Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining today's Learning Lab. So for today, we are going to take you through release 1 of 2025 from Sage Intacct, and we're going to take you through our highlights in that release. But first of all, let me just get started with some introductions and housekeeping. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Fiona, I work in customer success team, and taking today's session is going to be Jack. He's our senior Intacct consultant. Just before I hand you over to Jack, though, let me just take you through some housekeeping. So your microphones will be muted throughout today's session. However, there will be an opportunity at the end of the session to take yourself off mute and ask any questions. There is also going to be in your GoToWebinar panel box, there is a section there that you can pop in any questions that you have as we go through today's session, and I can read those out for you at the end of today. For any that we can't get back to you on straight away, we will take offline and get back to you, but hopefully we can answer your questions online today. Also, the session is going to be recorded, so if you are unable to stay for the whole of the session, or you have others who weren't able to join at all today, we will send you a copy of the recording out after the Learning Lab is finished. So please feel free to share this amongst colleagues or anyone who wasn't able to stay today, or revisit and rewatch at your convenience. Okay, that's everything from me. I'll catch up with you again at the end of the session, and I'll hand you over to Jack now. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Yeah, hi, so Jack, Senior Intacct Consultant. So you may or may not have worked with me if you've been through any of our implementations. But yeah, just going to take you through some of the release highlights. I've got a little bit of housekeeping of my own just to run through very quickly. Just relates to 2 points. So validation of custom domains. This might be something you've already done, it might be something you haven't, but effectively it's going to be enforced by end of May 2025. So I just want to highlight that needs to be done. Appreciate that this is something that probably your IT team will need to support with, and obviously ourselves or a consultant or a support person can obviously assist with this. But it effectively relates to your email sender domain. So within your company settings, under your security, if I just move this bar over here, when we go ahead and click edit on the security bar and we scroll down, you'll have this area. Now, if you've worked with this before, it might have looked a little bit different. It's changed now. They're calling it email enhanced sender domains now. So all you need to do is either click on add domain and put in, for example, again, your IT team will know what this is, but it's effectively whatever your your @companyname.com is. You'll go ahead and click authenticate. That's going to then generate a set of DNS keys which your IT team will need to input into your email delivery service. Again, won't spend too much time on this, just make them aware if that's something that you are utilising, you know that you've got email sender domain settings up and running. Just check with them that they've definitely validated the domain, because that's going to become a requirement. And if you don't have it done by May 25, the service is basically going to stop working until you do that validation. So please do that to make sure that you don't have any interference with your email delivery system. Other thing is just with regards to the old receive payments function within AR. We do believe it was supposed to have been retired this release, but it looks like that's been taken away and pushed back now. I've put this as a to be confirmed because it is going to happen very, very soon, probably in the next release. For anyone that's unsure of that, it effectively relates to this function within accounts receivable. So at present, whenever you go into accounts receivable and you go to receive a payment against an invoice, you've had these two options: this receive a payments function, which looks a little bit more old school, and then you've got this newer one, which is more in line with kind of the functionality in the system. It's this one here that's effectively going to be made redundant going forward. So again, just as a heads up, if you do use this menu or you're used to processing in here, just keep in mind this is going to be retired within the next few months, so start to look at using the new function. If you are a relatively new implementation or you're relatively new to Intacct, you're probably already, and you've probably already been trained up on the new function rather than using that old one. Just as a heads up on that, it will disappear, so get used to the idea of it not being there, and start to move to this one if you haven't already. So with those out of the way, I'll just jump into the agenda. I'm not going to full screen because I'm going to keep coming out and going into the system, because I prefer to actually show you the functionality rather than sort of do death by PowerPoint. So just going to run through these main highlight pieces here. I'll show you the functionality where it is and kind of the things you can do with it. And then I'll finish up with sort of some early adopter stuff. I can't show you sort of that functionality because we don't have a system that's subscribed to it, but I can talk about what it's going to do and whether it might be something that's of interest to you based on your requirements. So I'll start with AP automation with purchasing specifically. So this may already be a function that some of you are already utilizing in terms of AP automation within the accounts payable module. So until sort of this latest release, you could automate transactions within accounts payable specifically. That functionality is now opened up into purchasing. So if you've got that module, keep in mind this is an additional module. It's not included in AP, so you will need to get this provisioned. So if this is something that you want or you're interested in, have a chat with your account manager or your success manager, and they'll be able to help out with that. But on the basis that you do have that module provisioned, when you go into the setup tab in purchasing now under configuration, you're going to see a new menu pop up under the automation settings here. So what effectively this has done now, it's expanded what functionality you get from accounts payable automation, where you can upload transactions or email transactions directly to the accounts payable module. You can now do that for your purchasing, more specifically for your transaction definitions. So it's a little bit more fleshed out in terms of how you can utilize this, in that when you turn this on, it's going to create this table here. It's going to ask you, and you can do this on a per entity basis. So top level will effectively mean that this is global and it impacts all of your companies and all of your entities. But you might also want some entity specific settings. So you can pick, maybe for E100, I want a different target. I want to be able to generate purchase orders from purchase recs, but for E200, I might want it to be POs into invoices. I'm just going to keep it simple and apply this as global. So just with top level, the target is effectively the target that I want to, it's effectively the transaction definition that I want to generate a transaction for. So again, in this instance, I'm just going to pick purchase invoice, and then the source is actually going to relate to the document matching functionality that comes into play with purchasing. So if you think about your workflows, I won't see you as a top level in here, but if I go to entity, I will. So if we have a think about workflows where you might have something along the lines of a purchase requisition that converts into a PO, then into an invoice, the system within purchasing automation is now able to match the purchase invoice it's going to create, for example, to the PO that it's effectively associated with that's in system. And that's where this comes into play. So you're able to pick the source, so it will basically match that up with an associated PO. So if you've got that PO in system and you want to generate the invoice for it, you can set it up like so, and it's going to be able to group those transactions and track them. So if you ever look at sort of your transaction history with that, you can always tie back and see, what purchase order that was generated from, for example. So it is going to group them and associate them, which is really useful. Again, I'm just going to leave this as is. So in the source, I'm creating a purchase invoice off the back of an associated PO. Once you've set that up, that's all of the sort of configuration that's needed for this. Again, your implementation consultant or whoever it is that provisions this will obviously be able to help with setting this up. But if you did want to maintain it or change to more specific entity settings, then you can do that from this configuration page with purchasing. You have also got this box that will be present when you do switch this on. Specifically relates to configuration requirements. There are a few things that need to be sort of pre-configured in place to allow AP automation or purchasing automation to work. If you click on that tab, it'll take you to this page. If you scroll down towards the bottom of it, you're going to get this table under transaction definition requirements. And this effectively outlines all of the different things that you need to have in place for purchasing. Keep in mind, it's actually not as, yes, it's got a long list of sort of things here that need to be set up in a certain way, but it's listing all of the possible options that you might have in those areas. For example, for edit policies, these are all of the ones you could possibly have, so it doesn't matter too much. Same with partial conversion. One of these options, you'll have to go with that anyway, so that's actually not a restriction. The main restrictions come with the first two here, so just double check these before you decide to go down the route of using purchasing automation if it's of interest. And that is that the system needs to be creating your numbering sequence. So if you don't use an auto sequencer at present to generate your purchase invoice numbers, for example, or your purchase order numbers, you'll need to switch to doing that because the system's going to utilize that sequence to be able to match up a PO with a purchase invoice, for example. So make sure that you switch to that. If you're using a custom sequence for those documents, this isn't going to be an option until you decide to move to that, and it's outlined here. Other restriction is just making sure that the transaction definition can only be created off the basis of one document type. So what I mean by that is if I go into setup and transaction definitions, and if I pick my purchase invoice, for example, just go ahead and click edit. If I scroll down to section towards the bottom here in this workflow piece, this is where I decide what I can create this transaction out of. This just needs to be one. If you've got multiples selected here, so if you've got quite a complex workflow, again, you're gonna have issues with the purchasing functionality. It's not, the automation isn't going to work because the system cannot decide for you which workflow it needs to go down. It'd be great if it does do that in the future. I'm sure it might be something they look into, but at present, obviously it wouldn't have a way of knowing which direction to go down with the workflow. So for any automation you want to use, just make sure it's coming from a single document, so just from your POs, just from your purchase racks, etc. Those are the two sort of main limitations, if you want to call it that, or kind of requirements to be able to start using the purchasing automation. Double check the rest of these, but again, they're pretty universal. These aren't going to restrict you. So once you've done that, you've gone into your configuration pages and that's all set up, you are free to then go ahead and start using the purchasing functionality. So if I go through an example of this, so I might want to create, let's say that we've got a PO that's created on here. I'm just going to put in some random numbers. I'm going to pick a random item. Let's say there's 10 of those. Those have been sold for 50 per unit. So I'm going to post my PO into system. And then obviously with that purchasing automation that I've set up, instead of creating the purchase invoice or converting manually in system now, I'm going to use the actual email address that's associated with the purchasing automation to automate that for me. So I'm going to be a bit cheeky. I'm just going to print off a copy of this PO just because I know it's got all the necessary data on it that I need. But you might be in a different situation where, for example, you can give your supplier an email to send the invoice to, and it's obviously going to automatically push it to the relevant area here. Before I go ahead and send the email, the place where you get access to the different email addresses that the automation runs with is still in the same area. So if you're not aware of that, it's under AP in setup and then under configuration. It's under, so if you decide to go with purchasing automation, it's gonna turn it on in AP anyway. And it's just under the AP automation area, which I should have. Oh, it's good on the entity level. I'm sure many of you can do that. It's all. So at top level specifically, you're going to have this section here. So you've got your upload. So you can literally click the upload button with an AP and just tag the PDF or the Word document, whatever it is that the invoice is in, whatever format, and just click upload and it'll create it for you. But I'm going to use the email service. So to look at the emails that I've got that work with this, I can just click on configure. And then it's got a list of the email addresses that relate to different areas. So if I want this invoice to be created at top level, I can fire it to this mailbox. If I want it to be created in one of these specific entities, I go for one of these. So I'm going to pick, I'm working in entity 1, which is this UK one. So I'm going to pick the mailbox that's associated with that. And that's where I'm going to effectively direct the email to. So I'm just going to create a new email here. I'm just going to drop the address that I've copied from Sage. Subject doesn't matter too much. I'll just call this PI test security. Then I'm going to grab that PO that I've just downloaded. I'm just going to attach it to this email. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click send. So if we just wait for that to come through, there is a way that you can look at this and monitor your usage with purchase automation as well. So if you go under company, it is exclusive to your admins, so you will need full admin access to do this. But at the bottom of this admin menu, you've got this subscription usage option. If you click on that, you're going to have this section show up in automated transactions, and it's going to show you basically the transactions it's created, how many, so you can see how much sort of usage that you're getting out of it. It's also a good way of, obviously, when you're in the full workflow of using this, you're not going to be checking it, but if you want to make sure that it's sort of sending transactions, for example, with this demo here, I'm just going to keep an eye on this. I've got 2 examples here that I've created the other day, but I'm just going to wait for this to come through. So I'm expecting this to go to 3 in a minute. And what this is going to do whilst we wait, this is going to effectively take the PO, read the PO numbers associated with it, and it's going to go ahead and generate the purchase invoice within my PI section instead. Can't remember what the detail was that they used. So I used unique systems here. So I'm expecting purchase invoice to appear for unique systems shortly. Then it's not something that, like with all of the automated areas in system, it's not instantaneous. It runs off sort of server checks and background offline job queues. So it gets submitted to a job queue on the server. So it will take, depending on sort of the volume that's coming through. There we go. So it's come up now. It will take probably a few minutes for it to appear from the point of when it's been sent via that email. So you can see this is actually showing up in my purchase invoices. So it's gone ahead and created that. So I can go and have a look at it. Again, you can see, so I put an order of 10 items at 50, and I used this item here. So it's correctly picked up those details. It's also provided the document or the PDF that would have been attached to that email. It will go ahead and attach it to this invoice. So if you need to get at that original document, it is going to automatically store that in system. So it's really useful for, one, if you want to reconcile kind of what's been pulled through, but two, just for historical purposes, if you ever need to access the actual invoice from the supplier. And you can see on the history tab, if I go to here, it's gone ahead and associated it with that PO I created earlier. So it's actually matched it to that. So I'm able to access the PO that was originally created. Again, this isn't limited necessarily to from PO to PI. You could do this for your recs. You could do it for all three effectively, so you can automate the whole thing. But that's effectively how the purchasing automation will work. Really useful feature if you do have high volume with invoices, and you've got purchase clerks and people are tired of having to input those invoices manually. So keep in mind it does bring it in on a draft state as well. So it is going to require you to just sense check it and actually post it. So if you just go in and hit edit, just have a look at the details, make sure that it's okay, and then you can go ahead and hit post. It probably will be released further down the line where it can post directly, but for now it's just going to put it in a draft status so that you can make sure that the details are okay, with it being a fairly new feature. So that's our purchasing automation that's come in. I'm going to jump to purchase order approval delegation now. Fairly simple one, this, but really important one, or really useful one that's come into play, because we do get this issue quite a lot where you might have someone that's out of office, maybe an FD or a CFO that approves, and you haven't been able to assign a delegate because all the other users are either restricted, or there's some sort of limitation to kind of how they can approve. So originally, before now, if you had any restrictions, for example, if a user was restricted to a certain department or location, anything like that, they weren't able to be part of a delegation approval. It needed to be someone who had full access to the system. So anyone who was restricted within these settings couldn't be part of delegation. That isn't the case anymore. So within purchasing, if I go to my approval setup, just in the config, and if I go down to same area as it was before, I've not got it switched on in here, but if I just tick this, and then if I go to enable delegation, I click manage. Within here now, so you'd always have that list of people that are approvers. This list now, you'll be able to see restricted users. So you can, in theory, if someone's normally only approving for a certain department, and someone's gone on holiday, maybe their boss has gone on holiday and they now need to approve for another department temporarily, you can tag them on here and it's going to go ahead and push those invoices to that person. The other useful feature that's come in with this is also being able to delegate to a user group. So you might not necessarily want to tag a specific user. So in the past, it was always, you know, if I wanted someone to approve, to delegate or kind of approve on my behalf whilst I'm out of office, I had to tag a specific person. You don't anymore. You can do it via a user group. So if you create a user group within your, I'll keep that page open for now, but okay, it's going to make me come away from it. So if I just go to quickly where if you haven't created user groups before, they're under company, and in admin, you've got this groups section. So you might have already done this, but effectively you can create new groups and assign those people roles. So anyone that's tagged to that group through their user will automatically attain that role. The delegation basically means that you can now target that group to approve when someone's out of office. So if I needed, you know, if I needed someone to cover me whilst I'm on holiday and I put my out of office on, I can now go in and pick, you know what, I don't want a specific user because they might be out of office, they might be unwell, it could be a situation where they just can't approve. I'm going to tag it to a group, and I can tag it to just all of the AP admins. So anyone who's part of that group will get notifications and will have authority to approve any of the invoices that I normally would. So that's really useful. You can just tag it to a group of people instead of a specific individual. You don't have to worry about relying on that individual to be in office. So that's that delegation function. Again, it's just within the purchasing. So if you haven't got delegation set up, definitely have a look at setting up if you are using approvals. It's even more flexible than it was before now. Moving on to fixed assets. So you can now transfer assets within an entity. So what it means by this is you can effectively reallocate those depreciation postings to a different set of dimensions. So if I go into system, if I go into if you're using fixed assets management module, then this will be applicable to you. I go into my fixed assets management module, and I go into my assets. I should have a couple of example ones in here. Yeah, so we've just got this one here. So if I click into this, when I set up this asset originally, I would have given it, you know, if I wanted to, I would have given it maybe a department, a project, a location, etc. And that will have been under the settings here. So when this loads, it's been a little bit slow. So if I scroll down on my asset, within dimensions here, you can see that these were tagged in a certain way. So I was sending the depreciation assets under department and under this JN project. You can now repurpose or restructure to go to a different department or project, and this will work back retrospectively as well. So what you can do now is, if I just check I've got some posted depreciation, just ignore the dates because this is probably in advance. Just go to posted, see what we've got. Yeah, so we'll go with this one. So I've got one for the end of March, which I know obviously we're using unrealistic dates here, but that would have posted to that admin department. So if I click into the journal entry, I can see here it's gone to the admin department. Okay, that's fine. That's my depreciation posted. I actually want to send that now to, you know, maybe I want to send that to a different department. Maybe it was incorrectly set up and we're already in the process of depreciating that asset. If I go into one of my assets, you're now going to see a button called transfer, which is here. So if you click on that, when it loads. You'll see here it's going to give you a little pop-up and say it'll automatically create journal entries to reflect with a new dimension. So it's actually going to do a new posting, and what that's going to do is it's going to credit out of the same account that you posted to with the old dimension, and then it's going to debit it back in with the new dimensions or the new tags that I've put on it. So keep in mind this, the date on the transfer does obviously need to be post whenever your last appreciation was. So if that was 31st of March, I need to at least post this the day after. So I'm just going to go for 1st of April. And let's say instead of admin, I actually want this to go to my pre-sales. And I might want this to go to a different project. They're all nonsense, so I'll just leave it as is. So I'll keep it as going to the same project, but I want it to go to a different department. So I've picked that department now. I've put in my transfer date, and if I just go ahead and click transfer, you're going to get a little pop-up to say assets transferred, and it's going to immediately bring you to this transfer history tab, which is a new tab as well when you click on assets. And that's going to give you a list of the journal entries that it's posted to correct or sort of transfer those postings to. So if I click on a hyperlinked journal entry number here, I bring that up. You can see what it's done here in that it's credited out, using the same account, it's credited out under that admin account, admin department, and it's debited that posting in with pre-sales instead. So it's allowing you to effectively update. So going forward, if you want to look at the depreciation by department or any other dimension, it's not just department. You can do that now, and that's going to come under this department instead of this one now. So really useful if you've started a depreciation cycle and you need to make any modifications to it. That's all standard functionality that's included in fixed assets now, so you'll see that from the get-go and you'll be able to utilize that from the get-go. There's no sort of additional modules required or anything like that with that particular function. So that's your asset transfer. I'll jump into supplier-based approvals now. So what this is effectively, instead of using the sort of the restricted supplier approvals or sort of the approvals that you've got now, if I go into accounts payable setup and config, if I go down to my accounts payable area, again, I've probably not got it switched on in here. Not to turn it on. Yeah, so if I go into my AP invoice approval, I click on my approval policies. If you've worked with any of this, you would have been used to just the options below here, not this one. So within this new release, this is basically a new function that's come in. So you've now got supplier-based approval. So what that means is if you pick that option, you don't have to create a rule set within here, but if you switch that on and click save, that's now going to allow you, when you save the config, that's now going to allow you on a per supplier basis to pick a user to approve for that specific supplier. So instead of having to route it to a certain location or a certain department or just driven by transaction value, you can now push all of the invoices from a specific supplier to a specific approver. So now that I've switched that on, if I edit any of my suppliers here, you're going to see under the additional information tab, there's a new box here, which is AP Purchase Invoice Approver. So within this box, I've got all of the users or all of the approvers that I would normally use. So if I wanted, if I wanted Peter here to approve all of the invoices associated with these guys, I can go ahead and pick him and click save. So what that's going to do now is obviously make sure that any invoice, regardless of regardless of sort of the value, the department, etc., all the tags, it's going to go to him specifically. The really useful thing with this as well is you can update it via import. So if you go ahead and click on the import button up here, you can always grab a fresh copy of a template from here if you click on this download template. So if I just download that quickly and open it up, you're going to see a approver ID tab when it loads. So it may be in American terminology, just because that's how the system reads fields. But if you ever look in row 2, you'll be able to see the name of what the actual field is in system for you. So if I have a look, it should be in here. Going along, there are a lot of fields for invoices. Obviously, there's a lot of tags that you can use. Should be in here somewhere. Here we go. So column DF on this particular one. So it's called bill approver ID, but you can see field names AP invoice approver. So you can drop in the user ID. So again, if it was myself approving a set of invoices, I can come in and just paste my name down against all of the suppliers that I want myself to be responsible for, and it's going to go ahead and route all of it to them. So it really is adding a lot more flexibility to what you can do with approvers. It's not working with sort of user groups or anything like that yet, but you can use specific users for it now. Again, really useful. It is expanding the somewhat limited approval functionality at the moment. So it's good to see that they are adding to that, because we do get a lot of questions and sort of queries around the approvals in general. That's it in terms of sort of release actual functionality that exists now in general release. So you can utilize any of those features, again, subject to your license. You may need to have a chat with account managers and success managers to get those functions added, but that's all stuff that's available now. I'll just wrap up with talking about some of the early adopter stuff, specifically these 2 features, which are going to be really useful, especially once they come into general release. So what I'll probably do is just pull up the early adopter menus for them. So you can access the release notes from as soon as you log in. You may have already done this before. If you just click on the read release notes option here, you can read up on all of these areas that we've looked at, and it'll give you more detail. A lot of them do have videos as well. But if I just go to specifically this closer system is going to be very useful going forward. You may have set up, for example, or you may have, through your implementation, been shown checklists within system where you can, for example, set up a set of tasks that you might want to tick off when you go through a close or something like that. The Copilot Assistant now is going to help with automating and setting up those sort of checks and reviews, and it's going to hyperlink to those areas to check. So you're going to get a table, something like this, and it can allow you to effectively work through those areas one by one, and it will take you directly to those menus. So make you review anything unposted, you can then close that area. If you're doing it on a sub-ledger basis, you can work through each one, or depending on how you set it up or how it kind of reads and calculates what you do on a close, you may just go straight into general ledger, for example. But this is going to be a really useful feature going forward once it is in general release. It's probably going to be something that we recommend to everyone to start using and will be shown during training. because it is going to sort of formalise, I suppose, the close process rather than relying on yourselves to effectively either create a list in the tick list function in Intacct or keeping it somewhere separate and having to click through the menus and go to those different areas. It's going to create active hyperlinks so you can snap to them. So closed processes should be even quicker now. Again, with GA stuff, click on this survey link here if you are interested in that, or have a chat with Fiona or someone in our support team, and I'm sure they can steer you in the right direction for getting access to these features. Just keep in mind with early adopter stuff, it's early adopter for a reason. Just keep a close eye on kind of what it's doing and just make sure that there may be the odd glitch or two with it. Normally, once it hits early adopter, it's pretty stable, but there may be a few things that they're working on before it becomes a general release. Other really useful function that's come in, which may be a lot more important than this one or of a lot more interest to people, is the multi-currency functionality that's coming in. So if you've been through any of the pain, I think I've already got this one up over here. I'll drop this over. If you've been through any of the pain of working for, especially if any of you work with multi-currencies, and you've tried to convert, you've tried to do a bank transfer or a journal entry transfer with, more than two currencies. You'll have been through the pain of having to obviously translate the currency into the base currency before then converting it into the intended currency that you wanted. This is going to get rid of that situation now. So you can actually transfer with three currencies. So you're not going to have to post that manual journal entry that kind of takes the currency into the base currency of the entity. You can go into system now, do a funds transfer, pick your GBP into your euro, or if it's USD and it's in a euro environment, it's going to do all the postings for you instead of having to get that GBP into euro before it can then be converted into USD. So this is a really useful feature. It has been somewhat of a limitation up until now, especially when we've been working with clients that have had multiple currencies. So this is a very welcomed feature. Highly recommend if you do have those scenarios with lots of currencies, get signed up on this one probably, because it's going to help out a lot with that. And I'd hope that feature is going to come as a general release during the next release next quarter. So yeah, really looking forward to that one because it's going to solve a lot of multi-currency issues. Well, okay, that's pretty much everything that I had to go through. So we'll move into the Q&A section. I'll hand it back over to Fiona, just in case there's any questions that she wants to bring up. Otherwise, thanks for your time, and yeah, hopefully speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Jack. That's really good. Yes, we have had a couple of questions come in, and if anybody else has any, please feel free to take yourself off mute. I'll just read through these two that have come from Charlotte. So going back to the automated invoices and purchase orders. So Charlotte's asked, can you attach multi-receipts to the invoice automation so that they're attached to the invoice record in Intacct?
Yeah. So what you need to do is you definitely need to test with this being still a very new feature, the testing that we've gone through so far is somewhat limited. We've only tested this so far with single attachments, but I believe it will be able to group, if you have multiple attachments on an email you send in, it will be able to tag all of those to the transaction, and it should be able to, if those additional attachments have got more invoice lines or more transactional lines on them, it should also add those to the invoice it's creating. If it was an attachment, for example, you know, something wordy like a T&C or something like that, it'll go ahead and produce the invoice, and then it'll just add the attachment. So you'll have both the invoice and then the actual worded attachment there as well. So it will handle multiple attachments, yeah.
Great, thank you. And another one related to that is, so the invoices that come through automated, they will follow the same workflow. POs and invoices, they come through they will follow the same workflow during the automation and the approval process.
Yeah, so absolutely that. So it will be driven by, so you will decide kind of how the system drives the automation forward in terms of workflows. So if you remember when we looked at this section here, I've only told this to impact specifically purchase order and purchase invoice. If I wanted to automate the full workflow, I'd then need to add my further options. I'd have to do it at entity because this is set up for entity level workflows. But yeah, it would basically move through the workflow, and that's part of what comes under this. That's why these requirement restrictions are kind of in place, because it's relying on the fact that there's only one transaction definition that it can convert to in the next workflow. So as long as you've got that scenario, it'll absolutely work with the workflow. And then in terms of approvals, because it's not actually at this point in time going to post the transaction, it's going to draft it for you, and then once you hit post, you'll probably, if you've got an approval set up, you'll see submit instead. It's going to go through that approval workflow, as you've mentioned there. So yeah, it's going to work with approvals.
Great. Thanks, Jack. I hope that answers your question, Charlotte, but if you do have any others, you can pop them in the question box now, or as the session is about to end soon, you can drop them over to me on email. Okay, great. Thank you, Jack. I don't think there are any other questions come through at the moment. So if you do have any, if you just pop to the last slide on the PowerPoint, my email address will be on screen there, fiona@acuity24.com. So if you do have any questions that come to you after today's session, please feel free to drop me a message, and I will get back to you on that. As I said at the start, you'll be sent a copy of this recording via email straight after today's session. Our next learning lab is going to be on the 6th of March, and we're going to be covering understanding and maintaining document templates and how to update those. We really hope you've enjoyed today's session. It's been really good. Thanks, Jack. It's been really thorough and has gone through lots of great features that have come in on that latest release. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next session on the 6th of March. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.